Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church, and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation, and you can contact us by email ogc@accessradio.biz. Biz, of course, is spelled B-I-Z. So today's guest, who is she? Well, she started her adult working life in the East End of London as a youth work intern in 2009. Having gone to university, our guest swapped to another and became a maths teacher. She then taught at an Oasis Academy in London and then decided to spin as many job titles as possible in one go by becoming the pastor at Royal Docks Church in East London, the CEO of West Silvertown Foundation charity, running the local community centre, plus becoming the chair of a local school academy trust and, oh yes, becoming a mum as well. Our guest also founded the Royal Victoria Dock Park Run to bring a sense of community to the professionals in the area. So, why does our guest want to immerse herself in a city but local community? What does a CEO of a foundation charity do? Why does she switch universities? Why be a chair in a school trust when she has so many other jobs? What is the difference between being the pastor of a rural community church and her church in the Royal Docks? So it gives me great pleasure today to welcome Helen Fernandes. Helen, thank you so much for your patience and helping me out so we can get the best possible sound on the microphone.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. For those that know nothing about you, where are we speaking to you from, please?
I am sat in the community centre that I run in the Royal Docks in East London, in the room that we affectionately call our meeting cupboard. A year and a half ago, this was our cleaning cupboard, and we needed more space for staff. So we rejigged it all around and we turned the cleaning cupboard into what some people might try and call a pod, but it's absolutely not soundproof or anything like that. It's just a cupboard that we painted. Here I am in my community centre cleaning cupboard talking to you.
Breeze block's not conducive for soundproofing, let's put it that way.
No.
Right, well, let's go for it then. 5 questions or not so important questions. Question number 1. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, Helen, who would it be, please?
I'm not someone that's particularly drawn into like celebrity or kind of big names. And I think my genuine answer would probably be my gran,
Excellent.
who, she died 5 years ago, but she was a real hero of mine. Just a real kind of down-to-earth London-born woman who, lived out her faith in a really like gentle but inspiring way, I think. And I would like to have her back because I loved all of her stories about like growing up as a child in North London, you know, huge family, couldn't afford shoes and that kind of thing, and just had a piano on the 5th floor flat. And I just want to know, like, how did you get the piano in the flat and questions like that. So I would just have her background and have some time with her to find out all of these things that I wonder now that I can't ask her.
And you could then ask her, you know the film with Oliver and Hardy, The Piano? It's all about getting a piano up to like a 5th floor flat.
Well, there we go. There's the answer.
Please ask her loads of questions on the Second World War, because I'm fascinated about that, especially in North London at the time.
Yeah, she was evacuated.
Where was she evacuated to?
I don't know. That's why I need to have her around for dinner.
You do. Brilliant answer. I'm looking forward to meeting her as soon as eBay sends me that time machine I bought. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please? Pastor?
I love the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. I'm very encouraged by the fact that this little boy brings his packed lunch and all the disciples are like, well, how are we going to feed all these people? And Jesus' response is, well, what have you got? What can you do? And what they've got is pathetic. Like, it's nowhere near enough. And Jesus makes it enough. And I think sometimes when you're doing the kind of things that I'm doing, it's very easy to feel a bit overwhelmed and like, well, I'm not qualified to do any of this, which I'm literally not. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I even the right person to do any of this? This need feels overwhelming. To think, well, I'll bring my packed lunch and I'll see what Jesus does with it. Yeah, so I find it like an encouraging thing to remember.
I have a laptop and a microphone. Let's see what I can do with it. Let God then take over. And that's what you're saying with yourself. You've got a packed lunch of sandwiches. What can I do with this, God? He will then show you. Love it. See, the thing is, I'd love to go back to that when he was feeding 5,000. And how many people there say, well, excuse me, anyone got any horseradish for my fish?
Yeah.
Or needs a bit of extra pepper on it?
Horseradish with fish is a bold combination there.
Mackerel?
That's the thing.
Horseradish sauce with mackerel?
I just think of horseradish with beef. Well, that's another thing for me to try.
I'm going to have to check it out myself now. Is it just me?
Yeah.
Question 3. If you were Prime Minister for the day, Helen, and could change any law or impose a new law, what would it be, please?
I think it would be a good social experiment, if nothing else. I would like to bring in a law, probably on a short-term basis to see whether it's worth keeping, where if somebody asks you how you are, you have to give an honest answer.
Yes!
What would the world be like? You would actually really think about whether you ask the question. Actually, sometimes I don't want to ask that. I don't want to know the answer. And you just say it and the answer's supposed to be, I'm fine, thanks. Just either don't ask it because you don't really mean it, or like whenever you are asked it, you just have to actually say. I mean, I don't think prison's probably the answer if you don't. But maybe you have to like be referred to group therapy if you can't answer.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Plus the fact, when you get to a certain age, like moi, pedantry becomes very important, of which there is a subcategory as in grammar.
Mm-hmm.
So consequently, when people say, how are you? And they say, I'm good. No!
I am well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Boils my blood. And also, then people will ask me, how am I? I try and tell the truth as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, admittedly, you might go on for 3 hours and they'll, after that, wish they'd never asked. But, if you don't ask, end of, really.
Yeah. So there we go. That's my law.
Thank you. That's a great law. I wish you would become Prime Minister. Question 4, and I'll be the sports minister, that's okay. Outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out so far, please, Helen?
So I really can't decide between two, and they are completely opposite. And I think that's quite good, actually.
Yes.
At the community centre that we run, we do loads of community events, and we do lots of, for Diwali, for Christmas, for our summer fun day. And those are always my highlights of the year, like just seeing really unlikely groups of people coming together, celebrating and understanding each other more. And yeah, just kind of a real sense of togetherness when so often there isn't that sense. So yeah, any of these kind of community events, they normally make me cry a little bit. I love them. And then on the flip side, the other thing, if you just say to me like, Helen, if you could be anywhere right now doing anything, the answer is always on my own or with one or two other people that would enjoy it, on the coast path, in the sun, walking. Like that's my dream way of relaxing, just walking the British coast path in the sun. Either one of those.
That's wonderful. Of course, I live in Northern Ireland now, near the coast.
Mm-hmm.
So we could almost do that for you, apart from the fact you said the word sun.
Yeah.
You put rain in
A
there.
bit of wind and rain.
This is the place to be. Great answer. Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment to date, please, Helen?
The most recent embarrassing one I can think of that really came to mind was, like you said, I'm chair of trustees at a school. And we were doing our AGM, and I went up to get a cup of tea, and I was wearing my walking boots because it was really rainy that day, and my laces weren't very well done up, and then they caught on each other, and I literally tripped over and stacked it on the floor in front of everyone. I'm still young enough that when you fall over, like, it's funny.
Yes.
My colleague who's older than me says the change comes from when you say I've fallen over to I've had a fall, and I'm still definitely in the I've fallen over section. Yeah, everyone just came like running to help, and I was just like, no, it's fine, it's actually really funny. But those moments where I'm supposed to be the person that's kind of got this together, and I'm just lying on the floor.
That's funny. The idea of this podcast is for people to listen and find out through a different lens, really, I suppose, if we're talking about cameras, as to what Christianity can be.
Yeah.
And maybe they are searching for, a true picture of what Christianity is. So let's go for it then. First of all, I did mention right at the beginning that you've got so many job titles. But I also mentioned that you were at university and then you decided to change tack and go somewhere else. Why did you do that?
Yeah, so I hadn't actually started university when I changed tack.
Oh, I'll get my researcher, dear Dave.
Exactly. No, so after finishing my A-levels, I came down to do a gap year in the Royal Docks in East London with our good friend Dave Mann. And I really, really fell in love with the community. So I was supposed to be here for a year, and then I was due to go to uni in Liverpool the year after.
And where were you based originally?
I'm from Northamptonshire. If I'm honest, I wasn't particularly excited about coming to this area to do a gap year, but the programme that I was doing it through offered me a placement. Either I could do it in Basildon or Billericay or the Royal Docks in East London. And I was like, well, I'm literally not doing a gap year in Basildon or Billericay. Sorry to all the people, all the good listeners from Basildon or Billericay.
Basildon's famous for Depeche Mode and Alison Moyet, I think. And Billericay is, legendary for Ian Dury and the Blockheads, if you like my kind of music.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would have spent a lot of time with them.
Yeah.
Wasn't even convinced I would particularly last the year.
Wow.
I was going through some challenging family stuff at the time. But yeah, I came down and I was really captivated by this place. It is not what you imagine East London to be, You expect going to London to be very busy and just in London there are things to do, right? And I came to this place in West Silvertown called Britannia Village. And it was literally like a village that I'd grown up in. But instead of the village being in the rural countryside, it was in the middle of the city. And instead of the stuff that people would get kind of bothered about being maybe stuff that was a bit trivial, there was huge issues to be facing around poverty and discrimination and youth disengagement at the time and crime at the time, and so many kind of things that I just thought this is a worthwhile place to be. But also it was so easy to get to know people, kind of being straight in with the community centre and kind of already getting to know people within a week of being here. It was very easy to feel at home, and it felt like a home from home without it being an actual rural village. So with all of that being said, as the year went on, I just realised that I felt too attached to it to leave fully. So didn't feel that I could go up to Liverpool in the end, and changed my plans to study at Queen Mary instead, which is in Mile End, and which is about 3 miles from Royal Docks. So it was a great kind of best of both worlds, because I still went and lived in uni halls and had the student experience and did all of that, but kept on being part of the church here. And my part-time job throughout uni was working as a youth worker at the youth club. I didn't have to do any bar work or coffee shop stuff. I would just come and play cards with young people once a week. So yeah, it worked out really well. And now here I am 16 years later, I think, and it's been a very long gap year.
And of course, you also then became a school teacher for a bit.
Yes.
Coming under the banner of the Oasis Trust, the Academy. How did you feel with your faith coming from like a rural community in Northamptonshire, coming down to London? What did you learn about yourself doing that?
Oh, if you ever want to learn a lot about yourself, do some teaching for a while. It is intense. I spent most of my teaching time at the Oasis school here. And before that, I was at another kind of large local East London secondary school. In the large one that I was at, it was literally 12 form entry, which means every year group had 12 classes, which basically means it was phenomenally huge. I was a newly qualified teacher in the maths department, and everyone else in the maths department had been there like 10 years. They were really like embedded in the school, but even they would have like someone run past them in the corridor, and they wouldn't be able to say anything to that child because they wouldn't know who that child was, because the school was just so big. And I found that really challenging.
I bet.
Learning to be a teacher is just really challenging anyway, because you're on your own with 30 young people trying to get them to do maths, which, you know, I think we can all understand why that might be a challenge. If I'm honest, most of that year I started my mornings crying in a cupboard. Cupboards seem to be a theme in my life, don't they? And a very large cupboard in the back of my classroom, go into it, have a little cry.
Wow.
Sometimes my head of maths would just leave me a chocolate bar on the table because he didn't really know what to do with me.
Aww.
He was a very nice man. I then got this job at Oasis Silvertown and made the move to come over here, which at the time I knew it was the right thing to do for me. I knew that there was a lot of the young people that went to Oasis that I knew from the youth and community work that I'd been doing. And although I was a little bit nervous about what that might do to the relationship, I wanted to be in a space where I would care more about the long-term futures of those young people, and that I felt more invested in, because I just felt that that would bring out a better teacher in me. However, when I came for the interview here, my head teacher at the school that I was at was like, do not go for that. You know that school is a laughing stock. Because although Oasis as a Academy Trust is fantastic, Oasis Silvertown, when it first started, didn't have a building. So we opened with porta cabin classrooms on the community centre car park, and the community centre main hall was the school's lunch hall and dinner hall. There were some pretty tetchy times where it did not feel like teaching in another school, you know, it was very bizarre. So the head teacher kind of warned me against it. He said, like, stay here, go into Oasis Silvertown will be really, really different. And it was very, very different. Long hours. There were times where we were split over several different sites around the community, walking up and down the street between lessons with your backpack, just trying to get to the other porta cabin classroom site. And it was really a very different experience of teaching. But what I loved about it was you could see that you were making a difference. And I think that's what I was missing in the other large secondary school. So this Oasis school at the time was 3 form entry. It's now 4 form entry, but that means that it has 3 classes per year group. So 90 kids over the year group. That's enough for you to actually not just know their names, but really know about them and know how they are and who they are. And at the time, it wasn't all the way up to year 11. So we literally had 90 in year 7, 90 in year 8. That's 180 kids in the whole school. You could know every single child and know them all quite well, and know some of them really well. Yeah, I loved being able to be part of that environment that meant that you could do more than just teach maths. And because of the nature of it being a small school, you had to do more than teach just maths. So we would do reading with our tutor groups. We would do all sorts of kind of different things. And it meant that, my relationship with them wasn't just about maths. And I think as well, because I stopped doing the evening youth club when I was a teacher, because I'm not insane and I like to have a rest. But I would still do like some stuff during the school holidays over the summer. Like obviously the 6 weeks holidays is quite a long time. So I'd spend a few of my weeks in the summer holidays working at the youth programme in the community centre. And I loved it because it would be the same young people that I'd been like kicking out of my maths lessons over the year. And then I'd spend some time with them over July and August, and we'd kind of have some mutual ground and get on really well. And it was a very good reminder for me that the problem isn't the young person. The problem is that young person in that situation is not coping very well. And it would be a really good space for me to kind of remind myself of that, and hopefully see for the young person to see that that was something that I knew, like you are a person that is worth investing in. And I understand that the maths classroom is maybe not your favourite place. Yeah.
I think also, though, from what you're saying, because if we had 200,000 teachers listening at this very moment in time, especially 200,000 maths teachers, let's say, we're trying to get them to understand that if you've got a quid and a Mars bar, in my day was about 14p. 14p less a quid will tell you how much changes. We're trying to teach them these sort of things, and then maybe they want to go and do something else with their mathematics skills afterwards. But you're saying, no, it's not just about that. It's a far bigger picture, because you're looking at the context of the person as to why they're reacting accordingly. That is a phenomenal thing.
I have a huge amount of respect for teachers, and I think it's something that all teachers want to have time for. But when it comes down to it, when you're a teacher, your pay is literally based on whether your students meet their grades that year. Like you are under a lot of pressure to ensure that children get what they want to get what they're supposed to be getting. And there are loads of expectations that you need to meet and things that you have to be doing all the time that just mean all those things that you kind of probably go into teaching for in the first place end up not being something that you get to spend that much of your time really focusing on. And I think I really valued being part of the startup process of the school, because there wasn't a norm at that point, and there was you didn't have a particular role that you obviously fitted into. Everyone just kind of mucked in and got involved in lots of things. And actually, as the school grew and got more like a normal school, that's when I felt less like I was using my skill set, because I think I really thrive off that kind of chaos and getting my fingers into all the different things.
But then we'll find out later on that actually this was really good training ground for what God wanted you to do next, even though you might not have been aware of it. And by the way, if people are saying, what's the answer, Martin? The answer is 86 pence change I want, just saying.
If you're a few decades ago. Right now, you get no change, okay? Pay your pound.
And you have to pay by credit card.
It's card only.
Also then, from your Northamptonshire days, because let's face it is slightly more rural than East London, your faith must have been challenged as well, I would have thought, moving from a nice area down to East London. What do you remember of those times? What did you learn yourself regarding your faith?
That's a really good question. I mean, I grew up in a really supportive church that really encouraged me as a leader, and I was so well supported, and I'm really thankful to my family and my church for everything they kind of poured into me over my teenage years. So my faith was certainly in a good place before I came to London. But I think what really excited me when I came here was a real sense of sharing life in the East End that maybe in more middle class areas where people kind of live behind closed doors a little bit more, you see less of. And I was, and still am, really inspired by like the Acts 2 church that get the Holy Spirit, and the first thing that they do is start sharing all their possessions and praying together and eating together. And like, that's what faith looks like. Yeah, I think that's the bit that really captivated me. And that's what really made me stick around, is this kind of sense that, it's more than just biological family and kind of community looking so much bigger. And that's definitely been something both in the countryside in my home church and in coming here that have really shaped me. I think that is such an important aspect of my faith.
Which is good. And of course, if people haven't realised by now, you seem to be a very naturally effervescent person and you genuinely want to help. But there'd be times I would have thought that when you especially moved down to the East End side of London, that you're now meeting different faiths for the first time. And it's like, well, how do I cope? Because I'm not used to that. So how do you cope? And what did you do?
I found it really liberating, because in my upbringing, you were either like an atheist, or you were a kind of Christian on paper, or you were a practicing Christian. And there was loads of people that would say, oh, yeah, I'm a Christian, but they wouldn't really actually practice Christianity or follow Jesus or particularly care. That would just be like, that would be the box that they would tick. And coming down to East London, like that's not really so much of a thing. You're kind of either a practicing Christian or a practicing Muslim or a practicing Hindu or an atheist. But like it's a lot more acceptable to just have a faith and kind of follow it and be okay about that. And that's one thing that's really struck me with some of the youth development work that I've done over the years. Like when we're talking to young people, we do an exercise where we get young people to kind of write their own mission statement and to reflect on who they are. And so many of them bring faith into that in a way that, like, if I'd have been doing that with a group that wasn't my church youth group back home, like nobody would have brought faith into that, or just me. Most of my friends from school, just didn't have a faith. Whereas here, there's such this kind of shared understanding of, yeah, of course your faith is important to you. That is a thing that is important. It just is a much easier place to start conversations from. And people, in my experience, most of the time are just really interested to learn more about other people's faiths, and not necessarily because they're thinking about changing faith, but because they know that faith is such an important thing to them. And therefore they want to understand why your faith is important to you and what's the nuances and the differences. And I really loved that, because it was just very different to the experiences that I'd had before. Yeah.
I hear that. Well, let's take it further. That's okay. Because, we might have Mr. Angry from Tunbridge Wells, where Mr. Angry lives these days. Mr. Theologically Angry.
Yeah.
I'm sure in the past 15 odd years, you've had people come to you, yes, but the Bible says, what up? You can't do this, you can't do that.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? And what did you say to them?
I mean, the Bible says a lot of things. It's probably a good place to start, right? You've got to read everything in the Bible through the lens of Jesus, haven't you? Like, where was Jesus on all of these subjects? Who did Jesus have around his table? How did he have conversations with people? If we're followers of Jesus, that's what we're trying to learn from and emanate in our own lives. Christians meaning literally mini Christs, starting as an insult. And there are so many things that we can misinterpret from the Bible if we don't read them well, but we have to understand the context. We have to see whether it was something that Jesus found important enough to actually spend time talking about. And we have to look at it that way. Otherwise, we can get ourselves in some really horrible knots. That's
a good answer. And of course, I take it in your community now, in your community centre, you've got people of different faiths, same age as you.
Yeah.
I would have thought that they would and if they don't know by now that you're Christian, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
But they also are coming to a building that they maybe are thinking, I'm apprehensive here because I'm dealing with a Christian woman.
Yeah.
You've got that. So how do you cope with that situation?
Yeah. The charity that I'm CEO of that runs the community centre isn't faith-based. We've got people of all faiths and none working for the organisation. And again, I love that because we're a community organisation. I want us to be representative of our community. So it would be weird to me if we were all Christians on the team, just kind of trying to do community development in our place. But alongside that, I'm pastor of the church and I run Messy Church and Youth Church and different things for the community that are more explicitly Christian. And within our community centre, we have our church that meets here. We also have another church that meets here. We have a Friday prayers for Muslims. We have Diwali celebrations. There are things for lots of different faiths that take place here throughout the week. And I think there's something really beautiful and valuable in that. And I think, the more we are spending time with each other, the more we understand each other. Yeah.
Just said there that you find it something beautiful in that. Tell me more why you think that.
Oh, I mean, have you looked at social media or anything? Like, people are so polarised in our society. We are so quick to point out what is different about other people and what is wrong about what they are doing and have an opinion on someone else's lifestyle and judge them and cancel them and, all of that. And there are some people doing horrific things that, do need to be called out. But the majority of people are living their lives and, behind a screen become a keyboard warrior or get a view that the media tells them this is what this person is like. The minute you just start spending time with people that are different from you, you realise maybe they're not horrible people. Maybe we see the world differently, maybe that's okay. And I just think there's something really valuable in being with people that aren't like yourself, having those kind of interactions and being able to understand other people more. And in our area, that's really pointed. There's huge socioeconomic diversity, there's ethnic diversity, there's diversity in terms of faith. And so it's really obvious when you're like, I am spending time with people that are different from me. But I think back to my very white middle class village, there are ways of doing that even within the village. I remember kind of there being certain roads that you'd be like, oh, probably shouldn't go down that road. But as soon as you start spending time with those people, it would be great. In fact, do you remember the kind of Christian Aid Week envelopes. My parents used to go around with those.
Yeah.
And I would kind of help them out because I was a good girl. And so they'd go around and give them, they would always put themselves down to do the like social housing streets because they were like, they're the most generous places.
Yeah.
You want the generous people, you go to the people that have the least. Yeah, I think the more we understand the nuances like that, the better off we are as a society, because the way that we're trying to do things at the moment, where we just like throw eggs at each other over a computer, is not going to work, is it?
Let's take it further if that's okay, please.
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing that I've learned over the past couple of weeks, meeting somebody similar to you, but here in Northern Ireland, and the point was clearly and very well made, that in the past, it's as if Christian organisations, whether it be 100 years ago, 50 years ago, or maybe even still today, think, right, we've got the money, we can go in and we can do this without realising, actually, let's go and find out first what that area needs, let alone going in and building something because they might not need it. Mm-hmm. What have you seen from when you turned up thinking, this is what I think they need, but actually needed something else?
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure I'm at the end of that journey yet where I know the answer. I hope that I wasn't coming with the mindset of like, let's come and save the people of East London, because that is a horrible mindset. But there probably was some of that in my white middle class 18-year-old ways. I saw very quickly from the way that other people were doing things that the way to learn about a place is to be there. I was really fortunate to have great leaders that would just show me that. You know, I've not been part of an organisation that said, right, we've got to go and be the answer to this problem and sort things out our way. You know, the example is I came down to do a gap year with the youth centre in the church. And the church wasn't meeting on a Sunday at the time because it was just meeting midweek to pray in Dave and Sally's, the previous pastor's house, just to, have that time together as a community and to invite others into that. And then once we felt like there was enough people within the local community that were interested in a Sunday service, then we would start one, rather than coming in and kind of being like, right, we're going to bring in all of our own people to start this church, and they'll travel into church and they won't actually be local people, but we'll say that we're planting a church just by actually driving in every day, you know? But how do we build up a church of actual people that are local, that live here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't need people driving past several church steeples to get to yours.
Yeah, exactly.
Carry on, I'm listening.
I think that approach has stayed with me, and I live in the church house that we used to meet in those many years ago for that meal, which is literally like a 3-minute walk from the community centre and the church, and everything is very kind of close to everything else. And that means that I see myself as one of the community. You know, I don't feel like I'm doing things to others. Yet there are still loads within the community that I don't have the same life experiences of. So yes, I'm a community member that loves this place and lives here and sees it as home. But I'm not a community member that is struggling to pay for my heating every day. So who am I to say what project is needed for those people? Like, I need to be speaking to them about that. I'm not a community member that's battling addiction. So who am I to say, here's the programme that we need for that? I'm not a community member that has grown up being a young person in East London. So I need to make sure I'm talking to young people about what they need rather than just assuming that I know what they need. And everything has to be about listening and time, and things sometimes just taking time and being ready to change, being ready to do things differently, but also at the same time not being afraid to just give things a go. I think of one example where we had a staff away day for our community centre charity, and we were talking about community needs that we'd all kind of spotted through having different conversations with community members. And we had 3 or 4 different breakout groups. And at the end, each group presented what they'd kind of identified as needs in the community. Because then the idea being us thinking, right, are there any unmet needs that we should be doing something about? Every single group talked about the need for support for families with children with SEND, and that's special educational needs and disabilities. And we just thought, we've got to do something about this. At the same time as thinking, what on earth can we do about this? So we started with what we know, which is sometimes what you can do, and where it comes back to me to that feeding the 5,000 story, right? We had some soft play that we used for under 5 sessions. And we're like, right, what we'll start is an after school session for children with SEND and their families. So we're not being responsible for caring for any of them. We're just providing a space for them to come. We'll get out the soft play and they can run around, and then we'll chat with parents. And so we started that. We ran that for a term or so. And as we spoke to parents at that, they kept asking us questions because we'd put the session on and thought that we knew what we were doing. And we thought, we don't have to answer any of these questions. So then off the back of that, we spoke to the Senko at the local primary school and said, look, could you come in? And we started doing a during the school day session once a month for parents to get together and just have a space to talk and ask questions, where the Senko would be there to answer the ones that we don't know how to do. And at that, the main thing that people were talking about was the need for respite and routine for their kids. So then we started a summer scheme for children with SEND, so that over that 6-week summer holiday, they're not just at home every day with no routine, kind of helping them to regulate, giving their families some respite. And you see how like one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing. But if you'd have said to me at that away day, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, like, okay, this is what you're going to be doing in 18 months time, I've gone, hang on, we don't have a clue how to do that. But bit by bit, we've been able to kind of build on our skill set. And through kind of listening and responding and adapting, that's where these kind of beautiful things come from.
Mr. Theologically Angry of Tunbridge Wells.
Oh dear, he's here again.
Yeah, but this is what you would get, or people who might hopefully learn from, but have got this attitude that, yes, but you're not quoting any Bible verses to them, you're not telling them that Jesus loves them. And look what you're doing.
Yeah.
Have you had anybody like that say that to you yet?
I have been quite lucky not to have too much of that. Although I'm very aware that it's a very real thing.
Yes.
And I think that's for me where the beauty of these kind of two hat, same community comes in, because, well, I'm doing that through my WSF hat. That wouldn't be appropriate for me kind of.
WSF, when Saturday fails.
West Silvertown Foundation, which is the charity that's not faith affiliated. Of course, that's not going to be doing stuff that's explicitly Christian. But also through that, we're building relationships with people and we're getting to know people. Actually, quite a lot of those families that we were struggling with support were families that were already in our church, that we were thinking, what on earth, like, how do we help them?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of crossover between the church and the charity, and in terms of like things that we're doing and people that we're supporting. But then I've also got these other avenues to meet those same people through. So some of those same people that have been involved in that then might bring their children along to Messy Church or meet us in church on a Sunday. But they can do that if they want to and find us where they're at. And I think for me, I've really enjoyed the past few years, especially having those two hats. So I can be like, I feel really comfortable that I'm doing this in this hat, but I'm also going to have some other things where I am explicitly saying, like, this is a space for you to learn more about faith if you want to. But if you just want to engage in like what we're doing around SEN, do that. That's a good thing. I'm still building God's kingdom. I'm still allowing people to live well. I'm still supporting people to live their life to the full. And that's fine by me.
And also, when Jesus said, go out and preach the good news to all generations, I don't think he said, yes, but you can only speak to certain people. And here is a list of people that you can speak to. And here's a list of people you can't speak to. I don't think it's in my Bible in that bit. You mentioned Dave and Sally Mann. One of the best podcasts I had the privilege of doing last year was with Dave Mann, because I think Sally was busy elsewhere. And it really blew my mind what he was doing. Seriously, that is a compliment and a half. But in light of the tribute that we did for Peter Meadows that went out a month or so ago, one of the clear things that came across from that was that, yes, Peter was a pioneer, but then he obviously then had to realize there was a time whereby just because you're pioneering, it doesn't mean that you then have to stay there for the rest of your life and enjoy any spoils that come your way, because actually you might be doing something worse as a result of it. And your character might actually be destroying the gift that you've been given to use. Dave and Sally Mann, as you just mentioned, up and left to go to other places willingly. Yeah. You've come in, you've got big shoes to fill, and then some, and then make it your own domain. How did you feel when you had to take over in their shoes? And then what did you do to make sure, no, actually, I've got to do some other things?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, and probably quite, a very significant one that I've been kind of working through over the past 6 years, probably since they moved on. Yeah, I think the first thing is, yes, it felt like really big shoes to fill. And of course, the first thing you want to do is just be like, well, they were great, so let me just be like them. And it, of course, is a stumbling thing that we all fall into. And after a while, you're like, oh, no, that's not how we do it. We do this by being ourselves. As you say, Dave has this amazing pioneer mindset. And like, if Dave wants to get something done, Dave will get something done, you know, and it will be big and it will be impactful and nothing will get in his way. And he is, you know, tireless, like the way that he set up Oasis Academy Silvertown. Like other people would have given up 4 years before. He just kept going. And look at it now, it's beautiful. And we're all so grateful that he did. But pioneer mindsets often also aren't necessarily ones for the detail and the small print. And Dave knows that about himself. And I say all this to him as well. But there have definitely been times where I felt like I was kind of going along behind Dave with a dustpan and brush. Let's just tidy this up a little bit. Like, this is great, but we'll just tidy it up.
Yeah, because the great thing is Dave won't be listening to this podcast, so you can say
Dave.
what you want.
The expectations you put on yourself normally are to be like the other person. And I think other people aren't expecting a new leader to be like the people who have gone before. But yeah, when you've kind of seen what works, you think, well, let's just keep going with that. But actually, we're into a new phase in the community. You know, the community itself here, it is changing rapidly all the time. You know, there are thousands of homes being built. 10 years ago, there were 2,000 homes within a 15-minute walk of our community centre. Now there are 7,000 homes. In 20 years' time, there are going to be 22,000 homes within a 15-minute walk of this community centre. So like rapid growth and so much happening. And as that's happened, the community has changed like over and over and over. And actually, I'm a really good fit for the community that we have now. There's a lot more of the kind of affluent people that have moved in from other parts of the country, which Dave will admit are the people that he rubs up the wrong way.
Well, because they don't support West Ham, I think, is the main thing. Yeah.
I'm in a position where I can relate to those, but also I'm embedded enough in the community and have good enough relationships that I can relate to people that are more of the long-term residents and the social housing and things like that. And it's definitely been a journey to learn, like, these are the gifts that I'm glad that I've got, and I will run with these gifts rather than be embarrassed about them. And there are definitely some things that I did when I first took over as CEO in particular, I think less so with the pastoring of the church, but where I was like, I'll keep this going because this was Dave's vision and Dave's vision is always right. And it took a few years to be confident enough and actually know, like, this is my vision now and here's what I'm feeling is the right thing to do. And I'm incredibly grateful to Dave, because I still, you know, ring him regularly and Sally as well. And they're both so supportive of me, but have been very good at taking that step away, which I think is, you know, a really hard thing for a leader to do. And it already worries me. You know, I was with them for 10 years before they handed stuff over to me. And already I'm looking around thinking like, well, who am I doing that to? Like, if I want to move on in 10 years' time, who's my Helen? You know, who's the next person that I'm passing it on to? In the Old Testament, you've got Moses as this handover to Joshua, and it's really obvious over the end of Moses' story who's coming next and what's happening next. And it gets to the end of Joshua's story, it's not obvious. And then it all goes wrong. And that's a really important part of being a leader, I think, and one that, yeah, I've not yet worked out what the next thing would be after me here. But I'm really grateful that there was so much thought put into that transition between Dave and Sally and myself.
Let's take it further, if that's okay, Helen, because I'd like people to then listen to the Dave Mann podcast that went out mid last year. But this is also for people now to listen who are actually in a similar position where they might be a pastor of a church. They might be forgetting being a pastor. They might be in charge of a ministry, a fledgling ministry or whatever. Have a listen to Dave Mann's podcast, then listen to what Helen is about to share as well, because it means that just because you're a pioneer, you have to let go. It doesn't mean that you have to then completely say, well, sorry, Helen, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. Off you go. No, you can still be there, but you've got to have the strength yourself to say, right, I'm releasing you. You're going to make a cock up or two, maybe three.
Yeah.
But you know you're in a safe place to come and talk to me. And then we could then work it through. A proper mentorship, in other words. Because then you can then do that to the next person as well. So what would you like to say to the people listening today who either are in the camp of Dave Mann and Sally, or in the camp of you, or in the camp of you as an 18-year-old thinking, well, I want to go into ministry? Over to you.
I think if you've got that niggle and you're feeling that, in answer to that last question around if you're 18 and starting to think that way, that niggle won't go away. It'll only get bigger. So you may as well just follow it before it becomes a regret.
Yes, I can vouch for that.
That's my first answer. I remember during my gap year, Dave talking to me about who he saw as the next leader of the church. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, I want that to be me. And I was really surprised that I had that thought, but it was there even from only being here about 6 months. And actually over the next few years, then we started having that conversation and decided that that was the best way to go on. But we had over several years a really honest conversation about it. We're in an area with a lot of gang crime and youth violence. Mentoring is a better word, or being an apprentice is a better word. I haven't done my theological degree yet. It's still on my to-do list, so I'll get around to it at some point. There's a lot that I haven't done, but what I have done is spent 10 years kind of learning from Dave and Sally and doing things alongside them and others in the community too. You know, they weren't the only people that were investing in me or leading things. And the last few years of that, very intentionally us talking about, right, how does a handover work? What does this look like? And so we spent a few years kind of being like, right, well, they'll be in the front, but they'll be gearing me up with more things and showing me more things. And then it got to a point where and then we'll be gone, but we'll still be here for you. We won't be here for the wider community anymore, but we will still always be here for you. And I think that was a really helpful way of doing it. And I think they've also learnt lessons themselves, which, you know, they can share about rather than me, about when it's worked and not worked for them in the past, handing it over to people. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the balance has worked really well for us in that lots of time of me just kind of learning and being and absorbing, and then intentional handing over. And then that final step being, we're no longer here for everyone else, but we are still here for you, kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want this to be like an amazing tribute to your predecessors, because that's not the point of this podcast.
Yeah,
but I think there's a learning exercise here. For instance, you said you're like sweeping things up that Dave did. What have you learned? And what do you think Dave has learned? The fact that you were going behind with a sweeping brush, picking up all his entrails, for want of a better word.
I think it's really easy when you take over as a leader to, like I say, just try and emanate the leader that was there before. You used to get those, probably still do, the "What would Jesus do" wristbands.
Yeah, WWJD.
Yeah.
What would Joyce do, as I often say? Joyce Meyer. Yeah.
At the beginning, I'd be like, right, well, what would Dave Mann do here? Like, how would someone else handle this situation? And the more I do things like that, the more I get myself in a mess, because I then put myself in situations that I don't really feel comfortable in, and making decisions that aren't my style or anything like that. And I've definitely come into my own a lot more as a leader the past few years, as I've kind of got my own people, my own team within the church and the charity now. Like, people definitely would see me as the leader, and not in an authoritarian way, but that makes it much easier for me to steer things and guide things. And people really know what my strengths and my weaknesses are. Like, my number one fear is not being liked. Dave Mann doesn't care. I mean, he probably doesn't care. Everyone cares a little bit, but like, he's fine to go into a meeting and kind of do what he needs to do to get the bigger picture. That will keep me awake for weeks. And I will do it when I have to, but I have to really be careful with when I do that. Otherwise, if I'm doing that every day, I'm on the floor and I'm no use to anyone. But what I am really personable, I am really passionate, and there are lots of things that I can do. And so how do I just use all of those skills in the shape that Jesus made me to be, is the ultimate bottom line, right? Like, so often we compare ourselves to what other people are doing and think about all of those. And I do that with people, Dave and Sally, that I've taken over from, but also friends that are also called to do different things that are amazing. They think, oh gosh, should I be doing it more like that? Because what they've done has really worked. Their church has really grown. Mine isn't growing, but my church is beautiful and it's meaningful. And I'm doing what I believe God is asking me to do. And nobody can ask any more of that than you. The minute you get more of a handle on what you should be doing, the better. I spoke earlier about how we get young people to write mission statements, and I completely plagiarized that, because actually I was on the Changemakers course as an adult, through which you write your own mission statement. And I wrote a mission statement just at the point I was transitioning from teaching to community work. I've got a 2-sentence mission statement, a 1-sentence mission statement, and I genuinely used it to help me make decisions and to remind me of like why I am here. They say, know your why. Like, what is your why? And if you've got that, then just follow that. Yeah, my mission statement that I wrote is to support, encourage, and empower people in the Royal Docks to see moments of heavenly joy. That's the sentence that I kind of wrote myself. And I just measure things against that. Like, is this life decision, is this program, is any of that enabling me to do these things? Or is it preventing me from doing these things, And I think, as I've got more comfortable with here's who I am and what I'm about, I'm a better leader, and I have better mental health, and I'm happier and more confident. And I'm still incredibly grateful for the kind of support that I get from lots of people in the background. But I feel very sure of who I am and what I am doing.
Which is brilliant. Well, let's take a different tack.
Yes.
And now focus in on you being a pastor. But you, as a pastor, having to fill bigger shoes, because I know for a fact I can name, they would normally say, I can name hundreds of churches. I know 2 churches personally, of which I wasn't involved in the split. So that helps me.
Yeah.
But whenever a new pastor takes over, let's call him the old brigade, it's like, oh, Helen's not doing it the way that Martin did it. We don't like Helen because she's not doing what Martin did. And before you know it, they're trumping up all sorts of charges at you. And consequently, what happens when you go on holiday?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they come out of the woodwork. Right, no, Helen's a lovely girl. We like her a lot, but she's not doing this, she's not doing that. And so consequently, they call for an extraordinary general meeting, and before you know it, you're off. Or those people say, we can do better, we're going to form our own church. Not that that would ever happen, of course.
Never.
So what would you like to say on that tack, please?
So I don't know how much my experience can speak into that, because the church that I took over was a church plant. That the joy of a church plant is you don't have people that are stuck in their ways. And so although things have maybe been done a certain way by a certain leader, they are not yet set in stone, because there's a kind of recognition that things are growing and changing. And in our community, it is like so transient. People come and go so quickly that if our area wasn't transient, I'd have a church of a few hundred by now. But everyone, as soon as you get them on a rota, they leave, seems to be the rule.
And you're hoping it's because they're moving to other areas.
Yeah. They leave London. It's a very different experience to taking over. I can imagine in my home church that I grew up in, that was a proper church building that had been established for a few hundred years. That's the kind of thing that could happen more easily, where people go, no, this isn't the way that we do things here. The joy of being in a transient community in a kind of very different looking church that meets in a community centre in a church plant is like, well, how do we do things? Like, let's just try new things. And
actually, I want to challenge you on this, if that's okay.
Go on.
Because you said a church plant.
Yeah.
There are other churches out there in this imaginary picture I'm giving you, because obviously it won't happen in real life. Never. Where it is a traditional church and they go, oh yes, for the sake of the gospel, we've got to go and open another church. We'll call it a church plant. But this church actually still governs this church plant, even though it might be 5 miles away or 10 miles away. And they're saying, actually, no, this is how it worked for us. This is how you've got to do it for yourself as well. It sounds as if you're very fortunate that you've got a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
But how many churches in real life actually give a blank sheet of paper to this church plant? What do you know?
Yeah, well, not many. And in some ways it would be unwise to, right? Like, I don't know, it depends who your leaders are and how much you can trust them. And yeah, I could have done all sorts of things to run things into the ground, but thankfully I've got integrity.
Yeah, but you've also got a church that cares, that makes sure they get the right person in for the job.
Yeah.
And the fact they worked with you for quite a few years. So maybe that's a thing for future ministries to understand.
Yeah.
That brings somebody aboard that you can mentor or just observe, so actually, despite the fact they might be, and I'm not saying it's you, they might be loudmouthed, we trust that bloke, he's got something there.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about that in general. Like, where I can, I always like to kind of promote people within organizations and go with the people that the skills that they have and bring them up, rather than, external recruitments are such a risk in churches and in other settings for positions of leadership. I'm not saying never recruit externally. I'm saying recruit people externally at a lower grade and then train them up to become the higher grade people. If you're doing that well, then that's great. I'm not saying it's something I've mastered, but that's like certainly my preference, because it's, what you're getting and you can ensure that there's a real kind of sense of empowerment for those people and continuation of the things.
Yeah.
Not of the activities necessarily that happen, but of the vision.
We've only got a few minutes left before we get to the final question, which of course is, who's your Christian hero?
Yeah.
Which I'm looking forward to. In those remaining few minutes, Helen, why did you want to suddenly become the pastor of a church?
It's a really good question. I think because becoming a pastor of a church didn't for me mean going to Bible college. And it is a thing that I find really strange if you feel called into ministry, that the route for some people to do that is to go take 3 years out of ministry to learn how to do it. Yeah, obviously there are placements and things that you do, but I think I still see church as a really important thing. It's a huge part of my faith. I don't think we're designed to do faith alone. And I think there's something really good, even with like the joys of online connectivity and community not having to be so local. I think because of the way that my whole life is very kind of locally rooted, having a local church is very, very important to me. And so leading a local church is a privilege and a joy, because it's kind of getting to lead something that I find very important and want others to value as well.
Yeah.
It is possible to keep a faith without a local church, but I think a local church makes it easier to work through your faith together and to find joy. And that's certainly been my experience. But yeah, I have not yet done the formal training, and it is still something that at some point I would like to do, not in I'm going to take 3 years out of normal life to go off and do it, but kind of alongside doing normal life. And I'm a ducks in a row kind of person. So I would have really liked to have had it done by now, but I've applied twice and twice life has got in the way. With one time I got pregnant and the other time I got made CEO. And I thought, well, neither of those times is the right time. Yeah, to me, it's been really important to be a pastor and to be able to provide a space for people to come together and meet each other and spend time with God and understand things better and talk about things with wisdom and with joy and to encourage each other. But who knows what the future holds.
And of course, you're a family. You've got a husband.
Yes.
What does he think of you spinning all these plates? And what does he do for a living?
He works for my charity. For most of our married life, we have worked together in different ways. So when I was a teacher at Oasis Silvertown, he was a teaching assistant there, and we met at uni doing maths. So he was in my maths classroom quite a lot when I was a teacher. We're quite used to working very closely together, and quite often with me as the person in charge as well. Yeah, he volunteered for the organisation that I run for several years, and then somebody left, and he had been volunteering on that project for so long that he was the natural person to kind of fill the role. Yeah, so we're kind of very much in this together. And I think with the kind of model of church that we have, it wouldn't work if we weren't. It's been a thing where we've definitely had to work out our roles. You know, at the beginning of our marriage, she was like, I don't just want to be a vicar's wife. And, you know, it's taken us a few years to kind of work that out. But now we both have like very distinct roles within the community, but things that we both are playing to our skill sets.
Yeah.
We also live in a house share. So we often have others come and live with us as well. And we don't want them to see themselves as lodgers, but we see it as a kind of house share where they are members of our house and our family too. And that's a really good way of knocking your edges off. But it's also a really good way of having other people around to help. You know, it's a really unaffordable area to live in. So by being able to provide a space for people to come and be with you, it makes a really big difference. Yeah.
Finally then, we mentioned other faiths.
Yeah.
How do they feel, do you think, coming to see you in a church and maybe wanting to make a commitment, but they're afraid that it might be upset with their own faith leaders? What would you say to them?
I mean, you have to make a decision that you can live with. So if this is what you genuinely feel God is, you know, calling you to, and you feel that there is truth in this, then you have to have integrity and go with that. If that's something that you will do, then there's a whole community of people here to love and support you through that journey. But that's got to be someone's own decision, and it's got to be for the right reasons and because it's about genuine faith and not because of it being about anything other than that.
And if people haven't seen you living the faith by now, there's something seriously wrong, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Which keeps you going.
Yes.
Well, Helen, thank you. It's been an amazing time so far. We now roll into the final question, and that is, Helen Fernandes, who is, please, your Christian hero?
I found it very hard because they had to be dead, and most of mine are alive. I'm very young and modern, clearly.
And the reason for that is that you don't pick on somebody that in a few years' time, not that it ever happens in the press, they pick up on somebody and go, oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so I understand the logic. It has really made it quite challenging for me. I don't particularly even know how much of all what I'm about to say is true, so that's really useful for you, isn't it? But
that's good.
The hero that I wanted to talk about is St. Patrick. There you go. So now I feel really nervous because you can just fact check it.
Well, I can say, have a listen to the podcast we did live from Downpatrick.
Hey, there we go.
Two-parter. Seriously. I love letting people listen to it. And if they ever come over here, I take them down to Downpatrick so they can get the feel, the flavour, the smells of all things of what Patrick did there.
Yeah.
And you can then walk up to the top of the hill. And if you listen to the podcast, it is such a way, this is a bit of a plug here, you can listen to it and they will explain as it goes along. Hello, Elaine, and hello, Martina, if you listen. Carry on.
Yeah. So the reason I really liked him, I didn't really know that much about him other than, you know, St. Patrick's Day and Guinness. And I was in Ireland on a tour and they were, you know, talking about lots of things about him. Some of the things that he did I thought was genius. So like the Celtic cross with the circle around it and explaining to people like, okay, you worship the sun, you worship this, but actually that sun is really a representation of God. You know, God made that sun. Instead of worshipping the sun, worship the thing behind the sun. But then rather than being like, you're just wrong, just adding the sun to the cross to be like, here's your reminder. Like that circle represents this thing which has made sense to you before, and I'm bringing it into a new context for you with the cross. And stained glass windows and pictures for people that can't read to be like, here's how you can understand a biblical story. Just look at these pictures and that's how a story can come to life for you. And that was like 10 years ago that I went, and it was just a small comment that somebody made on this tour, but that has stayed with me so much. Just this thought of that is the job of a Christian leader, right? To bring the Christian message in whatever context it makes sense, using whatever methods it makes sense. If it makes sense to put the sun on the cross and be like, that's how it all fits together. If it makes sense to be like, let me show you this story through a picture. This is how we do Christian faith, and let me help you to understand it in a way that makes sense to you. And yeah, that's why I really liked him. And I'll look forward to hearing the podcast to hear a lot more about him, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was 2 or 3 years ago. And of course, Jesus never used stories, so this was a first, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal what he did.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. I take it you've been to Downpatrick then, have you? And been to Downpatrick Cathedral?
No. So
when you listen to the podcast, I guarantee you'll be phoning me up soon.
I must come. Yeah.
And we'll take you round. It's phenomenal.
Great.
Helen, thank you so much for what you've shared. Hopefully people got a bit of a flavour here now, that it's more than just about Helen. There's a bigger picture, and that they want to not only go and listen to the Dave Mann podcast to learn more about what it's like to be a leader, looking down and being a pioneer, but also a certain St. Patrick's Day podcast as well.
I'm just plugging it all for you.
You're doing brilliantly. I'll add it onto the commission rate.
Thanks.
Helen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real thrill. Thank you so much.
Great.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And if you haven't already hit the like and subscribe button, please do. It means a lot. Thank you. Next time on Off-Grid Christianity.
There's a way in which our authenticity, our consistency are a valuable rebuttal to criticism. Christians will always look to criticize. It's a worry, actually, amongst the church that we're so quickly to identify people's failings. It's almost like we make ourselves look good by making other people look bad. And there is just generally a culture within the church that I'd love to see broken. There's people who criticize the way in which salvation comes. If you do big event stuff, people will criticize that. If you do small, slow stuff, there'll be people who criticize that. Ultimately, we just have to continue to follow Christ obediently, to hear his affirmation, to allow him to challenge what we're doing, to be shaped and changed by him from glory to glory for his good and our best. So I think it's walking in close proximity with Christ is key.
So please join me with our special guest, the UK CEO of the Message Trust, Sam Ward. And wow, what a podcast. Until then, cheerio.